You're listening to episode 94 of the Play Therapy Community Podcast.
Welcome to Play Therapy Community Podcast, providing connection, information, and inspiration to child therapists all around the world. Here's your host, a licensed psychotherapist, a registered play therapist, and my mom, Jackie Flynn.
Hey there, Jackie Flynn here. Thanks so much for joining me in today's episode of Play Therapy Community Podcast. At the time of this recording, it is mid-September and it's gorgeous outside. It's just starting to get a little bit cool, a little breezy. So nice. Such a nice, refreshing shift from the summer heat, because it can get hot in here in Florida. I just went to North Texas for a training event. Oh, I loved it. North Texas Association for Play Therapy, Dr. Becky Welsh invited me there to teach on the polyvagal theory in play therapy, the Texas way. We had so much fun. I have this nervous system graphic. I put a cowboy hat on him and a magnifying glass on the front by his hands, and I called him Detective Nervous System, and he's in the desert looking for cues of safety and cues of danger. Our nervous system is always scanning for cues of safety and cues of danger. And when we experience trauma, it can kind of rewire us to where we're defaulted for cues of danger. So I loved it. We played hide and seek. It was so fun. I'm super excited. We have 2 summits coming up. The first one, Playful Emdr Summit, November 2nd through November 5th. Ana Gomez and Marshall Lyles will be the main speakers. And then Ann Beckley Forrest, Danny Monaco, myself, we're hosting it. And we're also going to be doing kids meditation. I get to do part on the polyvagal theory. And then Ann is going to teach us about EMDR with young children. There's going to be a lot of consultants there, a lot. I'm really excited about the opportunity for everyone to get some Emdr approved consultation. There's going to be trauma-sensitive yoga on the beach with Melissa Levine. Oh, there's so many things. It's hard to even come up with them. And then, as if that wasn't enough, we have another summit in February 17th, 18th and 19th that I'm hosting with Dora Henderson. This summit, Neuroscience of Play Therapy, is going to be fantastic. It's our second year. The first one went overwhelmingly well, so we've decided to do it again and again and again. This year we have some really incredible guest speakers. We have Dr. Eliana Gill, we have Claire Mellonton, we have Dr. Janet Courtney, we have Dr. Robert Jason Grant, Lisa Dion, we have Carmen Jimenez Pride, oh goodness, I don't think Dr. David Crenshaw. Gosh, it's going to be incredible. We're going to be doing sunrise and sunset at the beach, trauma-sensitive yoga on the beach. We're going to be doing drum circles. Dora and I are leading that one. I'm excited. Janet Courtney's going to be out there on the shore teaching us about nature-based play therapy. I love it. Oh my goodness, I love it. I had the opportunity to write a chapter in her book on nature-based play therapy. It's something that I do quite frequently. I do EMDR on the beach. It's incredible. But if you'd like to find out more about those summits, just visit playtherapycommunity.com. I put a tab up in the header there. Okay, so I'm excited about today's conversation with Dr. Debbie Korn and Michael Baldwin. They wrote Every Memory Deserves Respect. And the first letter of each one of those words is EMDR. EMDR also stands for eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. It's an incredible type of therapist. I'm an EMDR trained therapist. I'm certified. I'm a consultant and advanced trainer. I just love EMDR. Roden Breyer, the host of the EMDR learning community, introduced me to Debbie and Michael, and I'm so glad he did. He's a really good person to know. He has this capacity to grow this EMDR community like nothing else. And it's so nice to be together in a space where we can share resources, ideas, and not feel like we're working in isolation. It's super cool. All right, so I will stop chitter chattering and let's just jump right into my conversation with Dr. Debbie Korn and Michael Baldwin in Rodham. All right. Well, hi there. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of Play Therapy Community Podcast. I love meeting you like this. Today's episode is one that I'm really excited about. I recently read an amazing book, Every Memory Deserves Respect, and it is so very good. So I'm ready to share with you. When I say I read it, I've read it several times. I think for those that know me, like if I find something good, I like to read it over and over again so it's embedded in like every cell of my body. So I did that with this book, and I have the authors here and a good friend and colleague, Roten Breyer. So today's conversation is with Michael Baldwin and Dr. Debbie Korn. So before we jump in, I want to just have you introduce yourself, tell people who you are and what you do. And let's start with you, Michael.
Sure. So I spent about 40 years in the advertising and branding business. I'm also a trauma survivor, having experienced multiple forms of childhood trauma, sexual trauma, physical trauma, emotional abuse, and neglect. Lately, about 10 years ago, I founded my own consulting practice called Michael Baldwin Inc., which offers branding and communication coaching. I have a BS from Beloit College, and I live in New York.
Wow. Wow. Thanks for joining us today. I mean, thanks so much for joining us. That doesn't even do it justice. I feel like I know you, but you're in my heart after reading the book. Thank you. And Debbie, if you could introduce.
Yeah, so I'm a licensed clinical psychologist and I maintain a private practice in Cambridge, Massachusetts. I'm also an adjunct training faculty member at Bessel van der Kolk's Trauma Research Foundation in Boston. I was trained in EMDR by Francine Shapiro in 1991 and 1992, and I've been on the faculty of the EMDR Institute for the past 28 years. I've authored or co-authored a bunch of articles and chapters focused on EMDR therapy, including kind of comprehensive reviews of applications with complex PTSD. And I'm an Emdr approved consultant and also on the editorial board of the Journal of the EMDR Practice and Research. Oh, and last but not least, I'm a mom, and my son just graduated from high school and is heading to London to college next year.
Wow.
Yay.
Yay. That's a big transition from high school to college, but from being in the USA to London, that's a big transition. You're amazing. I mean, that doesn't even sum it up. All of those credentials and all of your areas that you're helping people in your experience, and for decades you've been doing this. And I have to say, that's incredible. And when I read the book, your heart comes out too. So you have like all of this brilliance, but also you're also like an incredible, like heartfelt clinician person, just a lovely human. So it's nice to meet you and be with you on here as well.
Thank you, Jackie. That's very sweet.
It's true. It's true. Okay, so Rotem is a really good friend of mine as well as a colleague. We do a lot of work together just to promote EMDR because it's such a healing type of therapy. Rotem, could you briefly introduce yourself, tell people who you are and what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a therapist. I'm a EMDR consultant practicing in Denver, and I started the art and science of EMDR as kind of like my COVID project. Just my interest in EMDR, talking with people in the field, and then I decided the beginning of this year or end of last year, to share it with other people. So I started the EMDR learning community where we focus on EMDR and learning, and we're learning together. So we, review books together, and we talk with authors, and we have a lot of informal meetings, small groups, study groups, a lot of opportunity to learn and grow together. And just a random fact, before I lived in Denver, I lived in Cambridge on Concord Ave, the same street where Debbie's practices, a few blocks away.
Wow, that's unbelievable.
And there we go, Debbie, another one.
Yep. Michael and I just discovered that he was born in Denver, Colorado, and lived in a house that was just a few blocks away from where I lived in Denver, Colorado.
Wow.
Yeah, walking distance.
Same street.
I don't
Same
remember
street.
that.
Same street.
Wow.
Oh my
Yeah.
goodness.
I know.
Is that like what Carl Jung calls synchronicity, or all of us call it synchronicity, but I think Carl Jung's work, that it's more than just a coincidence. There's a lining up there. That's so cool. I'm going to Denver, Colorado in November. I'm excited. I'm going to have to get some closed-toe shoes. I live in Florida, so I think it's going to be kind of cold. Okay, so this book, Every Memory Deserves Respect, and the first letter of each word is EMDR. That's the acronym of EMDR, stands for eye movement, desensitization, and reprocessing. For those of you listening that may not be familiar with this type of therapy, it is a robust type of therapy that has been around for decades. And over the years, it has really evolved into a something that we lean on when other therapies, or what we do, first approach as well. But when other therapies don't work, EMDR is something that can heal what some may consider to be unhealable. It's incredible. So I read this book, and my first thought was, this isn't just for clinicians. This book can be useful for anyone who's a human. And Michael, when you share your story, you share some really vulnerable stories of trauma that just touches our hearts, but gives us this big awareness that trauma is healable in a way that is story-based. And I love how Dr. Korn, we'll refer to you as Debbie, Debbie, you really kind of walk us through the nuances. And I have to say, as a clinician, I am also an EMDR therapist, certified and a consultant. And I learned some things from you in this book that I didn't know. I was like, oh, that's great. So I've been using a few of your words in my consultation.
Wow. That's
and in my
lovely.
sessions. So it really did help me as an EMDR therapist, even though I have all this training. It was nice to get another perspective on it, because I've never received consultation from you, which is on my wish list now after learning your insight. So my hope is in this conversation that we just kind of learn about how this book came to be, some of the content of the book, and talk about specifically the billboards. I love art, and you have some art in here. That's my favorite part of the book, is like looking at these, you call them billboards. I think of like metaphorical images. I tried to pick 3. It was so hard. Like I said, and they're trying to pick out 3 to talk about today. That was difficult. But would you mind just sharing your story of how you two came together and how
Sure.
it came to be?
I wanted just to, because I've got it sort of queued up. I wanted just to quickly show the book cover for your audience, which is right there. And so our story started with my treatment with Dr. Jeffrey Magnavita. So to be clear for your audience, Debbie was not my therapist. Debbie is my co-author. Dr. Jeffrey Magnavita was my therapist. And as I started to learn about trauma and EMDR myself, neither of which I knew anything about when I started to conceptualize these things. I'm a visual thinker with an image and a very simple text opposite, which that's where the billboard terminology came from. And I remember showing him about 6 of them, and him telling me that he said, Michael, this could be a book. So all you have to do is go and find an EMDR expert who's willing to write a book with you. And looking back, I think it would have stopped there, because, well, who on earth is who doesn't know me from Adam is going to agree to do a book with me, for God's sake? But Debbie was one of the people. He was one that was introduced to Debbie by Dr. Magnavita. And over the course of about 6 months, Debbie was able to commit to the project, thank God. So when I was creating it or thinking about it, my main hope that was, and if I shared my story, and Debbie also shared experiences of some of her other clients in the book, people might feel more comfortable talking about their own stories. So as you just described, Jackie, I wanted to come up with a title that used the same acronym, EMDR, but a different set of words, but they were still in context. So for a memory-based therapy, every memory deserves respect, I thought would be a great way to go. And it was amazing because the first time the publisher saw it, they loved it, and there was never any discussion. I also was hoping that men in particular would understand that trauma could be at the root of many of their symptoms and behavior patterns, because my sense is that men often need more permission and more encouragement to share their vulnerability and to seek help.
Yeah. And if I may, I just want to add something with regard to the title of the book and the cover of the book. So many trauma survivors tell us that they encounter other people who think that they should just get over it, right? Their experiences get dismissed or invalidated. They're often told to just put things in the past, to just pull themselves up by the bootstraps. And the message here with our title is that that our experiences, no matter how big or small, can stay with us and haunt us, and that trauma is both objective and subjective, and what is traumatic for one person may not be traumatic for the next person. And the image of the Russian nesting dolls on the cover represents both the memories that we carry with all of their many components, right? The feelings, the thoughts, the sensations, the impulses, and the idea that we all have many parts, each associated in some way with the experiences or traumas in our lives. So I just wanted to add that in. But to pick up the story that Michael was telling from here, Michael's story and idea for a book was so compelling that I couldn't resist. I immediately got really, really excited about creating an EMDR book unlike anything that had ever come before, and one that my clients would actually read, one that I could share with my parents who've never really understood what I do for a living, one that I could share with my primary care doctor and my chiropractor, who've been asking me about trauma treatment and EMDR for years. I imagined a truly accessible, truly user-friendly book. A book that kind of answers the questions that people have when they're new to therapy, and a book for those who self-identify as trauma survivors, but also for those who can't quite figure out what's going on in their life, why they're depressed, why their relationships aren't working. And it's a book for EMDR therapists and a book for non-EMDR trained therapists, as Jackie, you were saying. And for me, writing this book was a way for me to combine my commitment to mental health advocacy with my love of EMDR and clinical work and teaching.
Oh, I love
Yeah,
it.
so I have a question for Michael to kind of narrow down the distinction between EMDR and other forms of therapy. Because Michael, you share in the book that you had several therapists. You've been in therapy for many, many years before you met Dr. Magnavita. So what was it like to be in a different type of therapy, and what was different in what you did with Dr. Magnavita?
So just so the audience knows, over the course of about 22 years, I saw 8 different therapists. I saw talk therapists. I saw cognitive CBT therapists. I saw intensive short-term dynamic therapists. So I saw a lot of different types of therapists, but none of them ever mentioned the word trauma, and none of them were EMDR therapists. So by the time I got to Dr. Magnavita, I had been laid off, and basically a 35-year career was kind of over, and I was completely at sea, and I was stuck in neutral and couldn't get out. So by the time my sister recommended him to me, And by the time I saw him, I was really at probably my lowest point. And so for me, the Emdr experience was completely new from the very first moment, because I was accessing rivers and tankers of all this fear and longing and unhappiness and anxiety and all this stuff that I came to find out with him had been there forever. But I mean, just almost seemingly endless, because the first time I saw him for 4.5 hours.
Wow.
And it was just like taking the top off of a well and having it just gush and gush and gush. And at certain points, he would tell me, I think because he saw someone who was very much in distress, take my hand, take my hand. So I had something to hold on to, because it was, very, I use the word convulsive, but I think it's because there was so much that was buried for so long. So for me, that aspect of the EMDR was completely new. And the whole concept of coming in with a certain sort of energy, and then the idea of float back and target memories, and then Dr. Magavita would use this form of bilateral stimulation, which I'd never done before either. So it was all new, and every time I left his office, there was a profound sense of relief. Every time. He'd always ask me, you must be exhausted. I said, no, I feel like I have like 3 quarts more of lung capacity. I feel such incredible relief.
Mm.
And oftentimes I would drive home and I have to pull off, because my drive was 110 miles to see him. I'd pull off halfway and take a nap.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I find it really interesting that you've done so much therapy before, and you didn't know that you have trauma. And Debbie, you explain, Debbie explains in the book in a really nice way that there are kind of generally 2 types of trauma, acts of commission and acts of omission. Debbie, I'm wondering if you can talk about that so people will know the difference, because I think that a lot of people have, their symptoms as a result of trauma, but they're not really aware of it.
Yeah. Well, the acts of commission we're much more familiar with, right? So that's physical, sexual, emotional abuse, humiliation, bullying, racism, right? Direct acts that you can see and hear and feel. Omission has to do with deprivation and neglect. It's what was missing, what didn't happen, right? Those missed developmental stages, the missed moments of being seen and known and held that are so important for children. And therapists don't really know how to ask about omission. And it can easily get missed because clients don't recognize, if they've never experienced something, they don't know that they've missed something. So, what we know, though, is that profound neglect can be as debilitating in the long run as commission, as those direct experiences. So, I would say most clients who've experienced developmental trauma have some of both of those types of trauma in their histories. And it's just important that we recognize both. It's both, the work is both about clearing those shock traumas, those, big T traumas, but also about doing developmental repair when there were things that never happened, helping the adult self go to the child self internally and bring that nurturance, bring that recognition. And the same with the therapist going to the adult client or the child sitting with them in the office.
One thing that I found interesting, Debbie, like as you're explaining that, like what happened and what didn't happen, the commission and omission, from the kind of surface of the story, it looked like from the outside, I could imagine it looked like Michael's life was like privileged. Like everything was like more than amazing, but there was so much of that what didn't happen.
Right. Michael did live a privileged life, but he was underprivileged when it came to emotional support and attention and care.
Yes, and safety.
Safety, attachment, all of that.
And big shout out to Dr. Magnavita. I that's like part that it like makes me kind of teary-eyed to think about him reaching out and holding Michael's hand. That is so human. That is so much like I'm here with you. I'm another human.
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
this
I'm
anchor.
not, you won't let you go. Won't let you go. I'm right here with you. Yeah. Because I haven't that often. And
Yeah.
I had heard that, I don't know, maybe that's not such a regular thing, and maybe it's not, I don't know, supposed to happen, but it happened.
Well, I think that you just touched on it, Michael. There's these kind of should and shouldn'ts that hold us back. And I think when we bring this humanity into, especially our trauma healing work, that's where we get the kind of healing that you experienced. Like he probably had nowhere written anywhere, reach out and hold Michael's hand at 11:32. There was this heartfelt, like I'm in the room with this other human that experienced acts of omission, that has this something didn't happen. There was disconnection where there should have been connection. There was a lack of safety where there should have been safety. And he reached out and grabbed your hand. That there, what an amazing therapist. Incredible.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm speechless. Rodham, you were asking, as well as like people that don't know that they've experienced trauma, and then they have, and then Debbie, you mentioned shock trauma. Can one of you speak to like and I know you said acts of commission and acts of omission, and like everybody can experience trauma differently. It's not what happened, but it's what happens inside of us. But Debbie, specifically, you mentioned shock trauma. What are some other types of, or some other terminology that people might hear that could kind of help them understand the differentiality of trauma?
Well, I think, what you hear most often is about big T trauma and little t trauma, or big T trauma and small t trauma. I don't actually love that terminology, because the small t, what's known as the small t traumas, which involves developmental trauma. It moves away from the shock trauma, the single episode, the sexual, physical, emotional abuse that's more obvious. Small t trauma refers to the experience of invalidation, the experience of not being seen or heard, the experience of, rejection or loss. And we know that, cumulative small t trauma can be as impactful as any bigger T trauma.
Yeah.
It's that chronicity, it's the repetitiveness, the prolonged nature, and the fact that there's exposure to these chronic experiences without someone there to help, often the child, to regulate, to make sense out of it, that is so devastating.
Mm-hmm. To give some context, maybe like to what you're saying from my experiences, I think about like some of my clients over the years. It's not anything that you would think of would make the evening news, but something like my father never came to or never was there for my birthday. Or my parents never said, I love you. Some things like that may not seem like, well, they didn't get in an accident and they didn't have, weren't sexually abused, but it's this pattern of something's missing, something big is missing.
Right. And how does the child take that in? They take that in as, I'm not worthy. I'm not important. I don't matter.
No good. I'm no good.
I'm no good. I'm worthless was Michael's big core negative belief. Yeah, that's how it gets that's how it gets internalized.
When you say are internalized, just even hearing him say I'm no good, and then you said I'm worthless, I felt that in my
Yeah,
body.
of course.
It's a whole experience. It's not just going and talking. EMDR is incredible. So I was wondering, and wrote him if at any point, like I know you've have your own experience with the book, which I love. I picked out my top 3 billboards, but if you ever want to interrupt and kind of put one that's just like jumping out at you, feel free. But I would like to, Michael, if you're all right with it, talk about.
I'm ready. I'm ready.
Yeah, you could share your screen. The chameleon. I do a lot of like Gestalt play therapy and animal imagery, and the chameleon is a big one. So that when I seen that, I was like a chameleon. So that had meaning for you too, Michael. Can you talk about the chameleon?
Yeah, I'll talk to them. Actually, I want to hand it over to Debbie, but to me, it's just this is, as I understand it, the normal ability to adapt and adjust to whatever external circumstances that you find yourself in. That trauma just basically neuters that capability altogether. But Debbie, take it from there.
Yeah. For those that are listening to this program, the text that goes with this picture of this chameleon blending into the background says trauma handicaps our ability to adapt and adjust to our external world. And the idea here is that trauma survivors get stuck in the past and respond to triggers, to people, places, and situations as if the past were present, right? They're not able to assess whether someone or something is safe or not, and they make decisions that are not necessarily in their best interest. They're often cut off from their emotions, so they're not able to use that input to help them make sense out of things and respond effectively. And they're often stuck in fight, flight, freeze, submit, right? They are either in overdrive, hyper arousal, or shutdown. They're dissociated or collapsed. So they're not able to meet the situation at hand with flexibility and with any degree of reflection, right? They often just react without much control or awareness of what's in play. So, that's what we talk about in the book with regard to this billboard.
Oh, I love it. Trauma handicaps our ability to adapt and adjust to our external world. When you talk about the past being present, I just went to the somatic integration processing training from Beyond Healing in Missouri. They're the host of the Notice That podcast, and they touched on this as well. Actually, more it was like a big part of the training, like strategies. So, like it can look like that someone has a behavior or a problem, but really
Right.
it's just a strategy that their amazing human organism was able to
Right.
do to survive, like the chameleon.
Right. And those patterns are really hard to change when it's the patterns of survival have been reinforced and reinforced and reinforced over a lifetime. So we really need to get that pattern out from the roots. We need to go back to where it got anchored and start the processing there.
And you do.
Yeah, I was concerned, Jackie, that you will start talking about the polyvagal theory and we'll spend the next 6 hours listening to the
He started.
And I would join her.
Yeah,
I would join her.
No, Jackie, I spent almost a week with Jackie in Florida. We're in training together, and everything that you talk about goes back to the polyvagal theory. But no, I agree with that, because a lot of what we do in EMDR can be integrated somatically. So we can do a lot of somatic work that goes beyond the limits of language, right? And I think that's a big part of EMDR that we don't have in other forms of therapy, that we can go beyond to what our language, our words are limiting us to do in terms of healing.
Right. Like Bessel van der Kolk's best-selling book, right? The Body Keeps the Score.
Oh, yeah. So good. I like listen to that book over and over again too. It in utero too, right, Debbie? I mean, Debbie, you're like a super expert. It's 5 months in utero, right? Is that accurate information? Like we can have memories, like not cognitive, but in our body.
In our bodies, absolutely. I don't know about you guys, but I have certainly done EMDR processing where people report things that they claim that their felt sense, their lived experiences, that they're processing something from before they were ever born. And it's fascinating. It's absolutely fascinating.
the body is brilliant and healable. Ah, I love it. So Michael, that picture of you, is that with you with your grandfather?
My step grandfather. Yep.
Oh, 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 I
Mhm.
love it. One secure attachment can make all the difference in the emotional development of a child.
Right, right, right. We know from attachment literature and from resilience literature that even a single secure attachment can protect a child to some degree from the negative effects of trauma and neglect. And those relationships, whether it's a teacher or a neighbor or a relative or a peer, can make the difference between surviving and thriving. And it's not just what happened to you or didn't happen to you. It's who was there to help you navigate. Was there anyone who really knew you, who comforted you, who protected you? Right?
Mm. Oh, I love it. So through polyvagal language, that would be co-regulation.
That's
For those
right.
of you listening, there is a picture of Michael with his step grandfather at the beach, and Michael's this little boy, knee deep in the water. Of course, his grandfather is like ankle deep, and they are holding hands. Oh, goodness, I think about like Dr. Magnavita holding your hand,
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
Right. That's right.
smiling and truly experiencing the world together in that moment. What a beautiful image.
What's striking to me when I'm looking at this photo now is that Michael has shown me so many other photos from his childhood where he looks blank, he looks shut down, he looks detached, he looks depressed. And this photo with his step grandfather, he's smiling, this vibrant, lovely smile.
Oh, like
His
a
affect is really different.
so Debbie, like from a neuroscience perspective, what would be happening different, like in his body and his brain, his neuro or nervous system, the fact that he's with an attachment figure that he's regulated with there?
Well, here's where we jump back to polyvagal again, right?
I
It's
knew we were gonna get there.
with that acknowledgement, with that validation, with that comfort, with that safety, his nervous system is able to relax. He's able to be still. He's able to absorb what's coming at him. He's in a ventral vagal state, as we say in polyvagal. And it's a state that allows for engagement and joy and full involvement in the world. Right.
Oh,
Right. The alarm bells are not going off saying there's danger. Right. You're not having to be on guard or shut down for safety. You're able to really be present to the world and the people around you.
oh, which totally, I mean, that what you described in looking at the image is disconfirming of the I am worthless.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate you bringing attachment in the book because I think it's important as we do assessments as therapists when we first meet our clients to not only ask about trauma but ask about attachment figures. And again, both in terms of attachment figures that were not secure attachment, but also if there were attachment figures that the child was securely attached to, and this is extremely important for our the rest of the treatment.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Mhm.
it all goes back to attachment. It seems like at least a lot of it. Okay, so the last image, Michael, if you could pull that one up. I can't remember which one I sent you because I was like trying to um
I'll
pick
show
out
you.
favorites. Oh, I know what one it is. It's a metaphor I use, the blow in the breaker, right?
Mhm. Circuit
Yeah.
breaker.
Oh my goodness. I seen this and I have to say, and I may be one of those things I didn't remember where I seen it, but I was like, it's like an emotional breaker that we blow to like if you plug in too many things, the breaker's blown, it's like the electricity's out of the circuit. A lot of times I work with clients that they are experiencing the impact of trauma, but they don't have the felt sense in their body. They may even numb out or sometimes faint. So for those of you listening, this image is of a circuit breaker that's actually on fire, overloaded. There's smoke, there's fire. It says traumatic events can overload our emotional circuit breakers.
Right. Right. So trauma leads to dysregulation at so many levels, right? Emotionally, physically, relationally, behaviorally. And dissociation becomes an automatic default when the child cannot tolerate what is happening, right? And intrusive PTSD symptoms, nightmares, flashbacks, intrusive images, panic, represent what happens when the child's brain is pushed beyond to its outer limits, right? We have another billboard in the book that states that PTSD is a brain injury, right? The brain gets overloaded, it gets pushed beyond its threshold.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Rodham has taught me a lot about dissociation. That's one of his specialties. So, for those that are listening, may not be familiar with the term dissociation or even PTSD, can you explain that a little bit, Debbie?
Yeah, dissociation is, we're all familiar with dissociation at some level, right? In normal everyday life, there's some degree of dissociation when we get absorbed in a book, when we experience highway hypnosis, where we don't register that we're passing the exits on the highway and suddenly we've arrived home. That's our brain taking a break, kind of tuning out, detaching. But with greater and greater levels of trauma, there's higher and higher levels or degrees of dissociation. And basically, the brain can dissociate, can separate from anything that is just too overwhelming for it to metabolize. So the brain can separate from feelings, it can separate from sensations and the experience in the body, it can separate from actual content or memory or imagery. And all of that can kind of get pushed aside, kind of held in different parts of the brain. And in order for healing to occur, we need to be able to reaccess, reactivate, and kind of integrate, bring together the different components of memory that will allow people to process and be able to move the past back into the past.
Oh, so good and so freeing. Gosh, even hearing what you're saying and putting that with Michael's description of like he felt this space in his chest.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally healing.
Mm-hmm.
It's incredible. Okay, so good. Rodham, do you have anything to ask before we kind of finish up our conversation here? Anything to say, or Debbie or Michael, anyone? Add to it?
Debbie, can you explain the polyvagal theory? No, just kidding.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Okay, so I do want to make a big shout out for this also works with children and adolescents. So it works across the lifespan. So you're never too old for or too young for this to be able to help. So we're almost out of time though, so I want to make sure that people know where to go to learn more from you, get the book, wherever you can point them. I'll also have links below this video wherever you're watching or listening, you'll be able to click as well.
Great. Thank you, Jackie. Yeah, we have a beautiful website. It's www.everymemorydeservesrespect.com, the name of the book.
Okay.
And on the website, you'll find articles and essays about EMDR, some written by me, some by others. You'll find articles and information about trauma and trauma-informed care. And you'll find lots of links to podcasts and interviews and presentations that we've done. And we're about to start a 4-month book publicity campaign in August. So there will be a lot more posted in the upcoming months. And there's also a section on the website about upcoming events where anything that we've scheduled that's open to the public or more specifically to mental health professionals will be posted. And Michael, maybe you can say something about where to get
Yeah, our book is available on Amazon as well as other online booksellers. And the links to these booksellers are on everymemorydeservesrespect.com. You can also get it in all brick and mortar, like I think every single Barnes and Noble. I walk into everyone whenever I go to any city. I always go in there and seem to always have our book in there, which is so nice. And if your local bookstore isn't carrying it, we'd love for you to request that they order it. And also for those of you who prefer to, as Jackie mentioned, to listen, Our publisher did really an outstanding job with the Audible version of the book. So if you prefer, you can listen to it as well. But I will tell you that because I'm out with one of the people here I'm staying with, they loved the Audible and had never seen the book. So they had never seen the 60 billboards, which is like a book in a book. So if you do the Audible, I would highly recommend that you also get the book.
That's what I did. I even took it on my vacation. Actually, for those of you watching, I have to show you because I was so excited. I went to Italy and I never really go on a fancy vacation. So I'm not the person that goes on all these vacations. This is like literally the trip of a lifetime for me. And I had very limited room in my backpack because I was going on a sailboat vacation. So they don't let you bring big luggage. And I'm coming from the USA and Florida. So I made room for this book. It did get a little tattered and wrinkled, but I had listened to the Audible before and I was hungry for the billboards. And it is a different experience reading it and watching the billboards. But right there off of the coast, the Amalfi Coast. So I sent this to Debbie and Michael on my trip. Oh, this is the still image. But if you could see, the beautiful Italian scenery in the back. And I think when I took that picture, I was.
Oh. And actually, I should also mention the Italian version of the book just got published.
Yeah.
And we think now the next version will be in Greece, the Greek version of the book. So we're hopefully up to 2 external foreign editions of the book and counting.
Oh, now for those of you listening, especially if you're in the Play Therapy Community Facebook group, if you go on vacation, take the book and take a picture of yourself and post it. Because this book, it is great there, Rodham has a picture. It is great to promote among our clinical world, but this book is really for anybody that's human. It can raise our capacity to reduce the human suffering in the world. It's beautiful. It's an easy read too. It's not one of those that you have to pause and digest what did they say in real terms. It's something that you can it's a page turner, or it was for me. Okay, so I do want to do a big shout out for the EMDR learning community. Rodham has created this incredible community. It is filled with opportunities. There's all kinds of resources there that'll be linked below. We have a EMDR no fee study group for children or child and teen clinicians. At the time of this recording, it's July 2022, but whatever time you're listening to it, go to that link and see what's available there. Also, you can find some more resources at playtherapycommunity.com if you're interested in some play therapy programs. And also a big shout out for our first annual Playful EMDR Summit with Ann Beckley Forrest and Annie Monaco and myself. Oh, it's going to be amazing. We have Marshall Lyles and Ana Gomez as the speakers. Oh my goodness, I can't believe it. When I was first trained in EMDR, I held her book like a lifeline. I took it on vacation with me too. I have all these memories of where I was at when I read what chapter. The Association of the Memory Network is incredible. But so I'll put links to that below as well. But thank you so much, Michael, Debbie, Rodham. Thank you for listening to this. I am excited about every memory deserves respect, just becoming a staple in not only our clinical practices, but I'd love to see them in educational settings and medical, anywhere, any helping professionals, I feel like would be.
Right. We're in a mental health crisis worldwide, and we all have to be doing what we can do to work toward a trauma-informed society, I think.
Yeah. Debbie, is so amazing to hear you speak. It just now hit me like I'm like with Debbie Korn. A little bit. I was worried about what we were saying on the thing, and it just kind of hit me as a wave like, yeah, you are amazing, and we are part of this trauma-informed society. All right. Thank you so much. And
thank you, Jackie.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Thank you,
So
Jackie.
appreciate it.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye, Rodham. Bye, Jackie.
Bye.